Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to do some paper pumpkin alternates. So this is the March kit. It is called Daydreams and it is unbelievable. I mean, look at the box. So there are full colour instructions as always, and this kit makes 9 cards, 3 each of 3 designs with the usual full colour instructions. And what I've done is I took, let me just bring it in. I took one of each base. So I took one of the blue ones, one of these lovely sort of just marbled pale yellow ones, and one with the sunflowers and the honeycombs on. I took one of these die cut sheets, and then you can see I took one of each of the card ingredients. There were holes to punch out, honeycombs to punch out, and some vellum. So that was the bits that came in the kit. And then what I also did was, there are 3 different styles of envelopes, and I took one of them and I cut it up. I mean, I haven't used it all, but I'm going to show you how I made 6 cards using those ingredients. As always, of course, all the directions and dimensions will be on my blog, and there'll be picture steps and ingredients and all that good stuff. So without further delay, let's get started. And it's almost like which to start with. Well, first of all, the kit comes with a spot, and this month's spot was Lost Lagoon, but because I have all of the big ones, I am going to use my big stamping pad. And I did bring in and use 2 other colors for my cards. So there's Mossy Meadow and Lemon Lolly. And actually I'm also going to use the Memento Black, and on one of them, every quarter there is a little set of dies which go with it. So as you can see, the honeycomb and the bee are the ones that go with this one. And being March, Paper Pumpkin started in March of 2013, so it's the anniversary month, and there's always an extra surprise. This time it was an extra stamp set. Sometimes it's some wooden elements, but this time it was an extra stamp set. So that's all the who and the what and the why. So let's get started. So the first cards I'm going to make are sort of 2 the same but different, and it uses these 2 strips of sunflowers, which actually is supposed to be on this one card. But let's get started. What I did do was I did use some dies, but of course you could just cut rectangles if you don't have dies. And this is the new one. This is the textured note dies, which is currently one of our online exclusives. So that I cut just a little bit ahead of time. And what I did was I went ahead and I cut one out of each underneath, because this is going to be layered on, and then I can use it as a layer when we come to build the cards. So I took a piece of Lost Lagoon, and it's 8.5 by 5.5, and it's scored at 4 1/4, and we'll fold it in half and give it a nice crease with a bone folder. And likewise with the Mossy Meadow, it's 8.5 by 5.5, scored at 4 1/4, and that fits into a standard envelope. And then there are just 2 pieces of basic white to go on the inside of the card. I'm not actually going to take the time to put those in, because this is probably going to be quite a longer video than I normally make, but just so you know, those 2 pieces are what goes on the inside. Then I took one of the card bases, which in itself is 8.5 by 5.5, and I just cut it in half. And I cut it down to be 4 1/8 by 5 3/4. And like I say, I pre-cut this little rectangle out of the middle. So then I'm going to bring in some adhesive. And stick these onto the front of the card. So it's just got a very small border around each one. Oh, Sticking it to the, well, I could have flipped it over, but let's stick it to the outside. Starters you mean to go on. Okay, there we have it. 2 cards on their way to being built. So then what we need to do is do some stamping, and I am going to bring in some of the stamps which I've already mounted onto my ergonomic Stampin' Up! Blocks. If you're new to the concept of paper pumpkin, when you order your first kit, you get this one, and it's quite nice. It's rounded and gentle. They used to be like really sharp, but this is what you get in your, look how dirty mine is, sorry. This is what you get in your first kit, but because I have lots of the Stampin' Up! Ones, I'm just going to use them because it meant I could load all of my stamps onto their acrylic blocks ahead of time. So I'm going to use the Lost Lagoon on this one, and it's just going to say, whoops, or it will say if I get enough ink on it, happy birthday. So that's that one. And then the other one was a little bit bigger, so it's actually going to say sweetest birthday wishes. And I will bring in the coordinating ink just because I took it out. And stamp that on there. So that's actually, let me just see if I can get a little bit cleaner stamp cleaning station, because I am going to be using these a few times over. Okay, make sure they're always going to make sure they're clean if you're going to be changing your colors. So now we're going to pop this onto its block and hide the hole that we created. And then likewise with the happy birthday. This one I just did a small one because I thought the Lost Lagoon was a lighter colour, because the Mossy Meadow is quite a dark colour. I didn't want to bring down and darken the front of the card, as it were. So I cut a bigger rectangle for the greeting for this one. So that's that. And then we are going to pop these on with some dimensionals. And the nice thing about Stampin' Up! Is they are always so generous with the dimensionals that they give us. This is actually not the pack that came. Let me reach it over and show you the real one. This is the pack that came in the kit. But because I've got so many and I'm ongoing using up my stash, I'm just going to pop some dimensionals on the back of each flower. And then we can peel the backing papers off, throw those across the room. Those of you who watch my videos before will just be feeling comfortable right now, because it's what I do. And then I have to go at the end and pick them all up and find them if they haven't stuck to my shoes and made their way through the house. Alrighty, so there we have it. So we've popped the flowers on, and then there was a difference of which we were going to stick on. So this one I'm going to pop here, and the B is the one that actually came out of the kit, and the one that is the Mossy Meadow, I'm just going to use a different flower. And this was just my little template. The kit comes with a B stamp, and I am going to stamp the B into the corner. Remember when I mentioned we'd also be using Memento Black? That's where this comes in. So I'm just going to stamp it with the Memento Black. Lovely bee. It looks just as good as the one that came out. The only difference, of course, is that it won't be raised up on a dimensional. So I will retrieve my dimensionals and stick that flower on in that corner. Oh, you know what? This one is a little skinnier, so I'm just going to cut this dimensional in half and put half on that piece and half on there, so it shares the weight. So that one can go there. This one can just have a nice dimensional on his tummy, and actually it's a bit big, so I'm just going to trim it down just a little bit. There are mini dimensionals, but I wanted to show you the concept using mostly the ingredients that came in the kit. So then we can pop the bee on that one, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring in my Daffodil Delight stamping blend and just colour in his body. To give it a little bit of a stronger yellow colour. And there you have it. There are 2 cards made using the first card base and a selection from this little cutout. So I'll pop those off to one side because I'll bring those in at the end, and we can go back over and I can show you all of them when they're all done in their glory. So the next one used the envelope. So I cut one of the envelopes down into pieces. That was the back, and well, some of this was the front. That of course is the flap, and on a subsequent video I'm going to be using that. I'm one of those waste not want nots, but this was half of the front. Actually, this was half of the front with the bee, and the other half was over here. So what I'm doing is I took the card that had the sunflowers on it. I've lost the ingredients sheet. This one, because the other side of it was this, and I cut it in half. So this is now 4 1/4 by 2 3/4, and this piece I'm going to use for another card down the line. So I took the card base, and it's 8 1/2 by 4 1/2, and it's pre-scored at 4 1/4, and I also went and scored it at 2 1/8, and we are going to make it be a ZZ fold card. So I'm going to fold it inside out, as it were, and then back on itself, and that is what makes the ZZ element of it. So this, like I say, was just the back of the card. So it's 4 1/4 by 2 3/4. It's a full half, but you know what I mean by that. So it's half of the card, and it's going to sit here. Then what I did was I took one of the flowers from the punch out, which went on this card, and we are going to put it on one of the blue backs. But lots of this is skinny, so what I'm going to do is I am going to use my liquid glue, the Tombow liquid glue. It's just a little bit more precise, but I am going to do it on my silicone mat, just in case any of the glue decides it wants to go somewhere else, then it's not getting on my work surface while I'm busy and we can keep it free and clear. So that is going to not cooperate. That is going to go on the front of the card like that. So we'll just give that a chance to dry. And in the meantime, I'm going to stamp the greeting, and I'll use the Lost Lagoon again, and we will have it say happy birthday. But I'm actually going to stamp it over to the right hand side. Because I'm going to put this little half a sunflower on here. So let me just put a little bit of adhesive on the back of that. Whoops. And then pop 2 dimensionals on the back. And because it's quite long, I'm going to use up that little piece that we had, and it can help straddle the length of the greeting. So peel those off. And pop that over. Ooh, can you see I've actually made a boo-boo with that? It's a little bit fuzzy. I'll have to send it to an old aunt whose eyesight's not so good. No, I will take it off later and do it properly. So now what we need to do is stick this on, and the way we do that is you can't put glue on the back of here because it will stick your card down. You only want adhesive up to the fold line, and the best way to make sure that you've done that is to flip it over, and then you can, and you flip it vertically, you know, don't flip it the other way. So flip it over vertically, and then you can put adhesive up to where you can eyeball that seam line is. And then you can put glue on the other side. And then when you stick it on, you know it's safe, that no adhesive is here and it's not going to stick your card down. So this is the piece of the envelope. This was the other half of the envelope that I just cut down. And this is, you'll remember, it's 4 1/4 by 2 3/4. This I cut down to 4 1/8 by 2 5/8. So it's basically a 1/8 of an inch smaller. And it just gives it a chance to not stick out when you put it behind. But first of all, we're going to stamp the greeting on it, and it's going to say, enjoy your special day. So let me bring in so we'll stamp that up at the top, and we'll stamp it not all smudgy. And then the best way to attach something like this, where it's going to be behind but there's a chance it can be seen, is to open up where the front is, place this behind, and then when you put the adhesive on, you know you've placed it so it can't be seen, and then you close the card down onto it, and it is for sure hidden away behind. So that is the ZZ fold card made with the blue card base. I'll put these pieces of the envelope off to one side for now. So I'll put that again with the stash. And then the other 2 cards are using this element. So I've got all these lovely pieces which are great. So what we're going to do first is, it's a piece of 11 by 4 1/4 scored at 5 1/2 basic white cardstock. So we're going to fold it in half, give it a score with the bone folder, and then what we need to do is attach all the pieces on the front. Now the most important one to get right is the circle, because we need to center it into the middle of the circle gap when the front is put on. But we're going to take the front off and do things with it, so rather than do it then try and get the circle in, just going to lay this in place, put some adhesive on the back of the circle, so we can make sure this is nicely centered. And put that circle in the middle. So that's nicely on. And what we're going to do is we are going to add these two flowers, another bee, and I've also cut a bee out of the dies that I showed you earlier. This was just a piece of envelope that was spare, so I just fussy cut the honeycombs out of it. This one I'm going to stamp the greeting onto, and we're going to use the one that says Sweetest Birthday Wishes. So I will bring in the Lost Lagoon, because that's the colour that came with the kit. Sweetest Birthday Wishes. And we will close that one down. So now what we need to do is we are going to, again, I've got little bee template, so I'm going to take this off and I'm going to stamp the bee in this corner. Just so it adds a little bit of an element over there. And again, I'm going to bring in my Stampin' Blend marker, just giving it a few dots. I don't want to rub it too close to the black, because it could get quite dirty. And then what I can do is bring in a scrap of paper and just give it a little scribble to make sure that any that has black left on it has been driven out. So now we've got the bee in place, and we can go ahead and stick the honeycomb just down here in this corner. Although I might hold off on that thought, actually. What we need to do is attach this to the front of here. And they gave us some strips in the kit, which are awesome. So I'm just going to put one at the top, one at the bottom, oops, one up the middle. Well, the backs are going to be peeled off anyway, so let's continue and do that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut one in half. I don't think the kit called for that on the original card, but they're always super generous with their ingredients, as you know. I wonder how you know that. It could be because I keep saying it, but it's so true. It's so lovely. And then what we're going to do is pop this back in place and make sure the circles line up. In order to do that, I'm going to stand up. It's either stand up and be a little bit close to the camera and sound like I'm shouting, or stick my head in the shot. So personally, I would rather be loud for a moment. So there we have it. We've now got a lovely 3D front. So the bee template we can just pop off to one side. And then we just need to attach the flowers, and we know we can only attach them on these points, because otherwise we would stick it down. So I'm just going to put a little bit of glue and these 4. And then we want this to be up so it's level. So I'm just going to put 1 dimensional in the middle of the cluster of petals. And then when we place this onto the card, we know the dimensional is going to hold it up equal, and these 4 leaves are going to stay closed. And likewise with, oh my gosh, with this flower, we will put it like this. I'm just going to place the greeting so I know it's not going to get in the way. So basically 1, 2, 3 petals. 1, 2, 3. So it's these 3 petals. Can have a little bit of glue on them. And then let's just be sure. 1, 2, 3. And we can put a dimensional on each of these ones. Yes. So those 3 petals will stick down. Those 2 dimensionals will hold that in place. Now the trick is you have to be very careful when you're using dimensionals. If you put too many on and they're double thick, it will make your envelope too fat and you may have to pay extra postage. However, because we've only got dimensionals around the edges and not in the middle, if we lifted this greeting up with dimensionals, when it goes into the card, it can actually scrunch down into the gap that's available, and it only makes it 1 dimensional tall. I hope that makes sense. So let's pop a couple on the back of this greeting. And then we can just pop those on there. And there you have another card. And then remember I said I had fussy cut this honeycomb out. What I'm going to do is I am just going to pop it in this bottom corner. I don't know, where could I put it? Actually, I think it looks nicer there. So I'm just going to put some adhesive on the back. Actually, if you see closely, you can see it's very thin, but that was because it came from the edge of the envelope where it got sort of taken apart. So it is very thin, but luckily it doesn't really matter because it's going to be put on an edge and stuck down. So we'll just pop that in there because it just gives it the aura of something extra when the card gets opened. And then this is the little bee that I cut using the dies. So I'm actually going to just pop this into, it's very delicate, it's very fine. Just have to be careful where we're putting the glue. Whoops, for this one. Don't want there to be too much. So pop that off to one side. And then if we put it over, the yellow of the honeycomb shines through, you know, the negative image of the bee and makes it look a bit more yellow than it is. So that's the first white card done. And then last but not least, we will go ahead and make the other basic white one. Now, again, it's 11 by 4 1/4 scored at 5 1/2. So give that a nice crease with a bone folder. What I did was I just cut this in half. Remember, I cut one of them in half to get the honeycomb piece for the ZZ fold card. So this is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and this white is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. So it is the same size. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to make sure there's nothing sticky on there. I'm going to put it on my silicone mat just so it gives it a dark background. And I'm going to put glue right up to the edges of this, and hopefully it doesn't squidge out. And then make sure we've got it the right way up. It looks busy, but actually I do believe that this sunflower pointing that way gives it an orientation. So if we put it on right up to the edges, and the good thing about doing it with the glue is it just has a few seconds of wiggle room. So if you need to smush it over just a tick, you can do that. So we'll let that sink in, and some glue did come out, so it was just as well, you see, it was just as well I did it on my silicone mat. If you don't have a silicone mat, I mean, I would suggest you put a piece of scrap paper down, just because when you're working and you're doing things, you don't want your work surface to get super sticky. So last but not least, the flowers for this card, I do believe there was one for each of these to put them on with dimensionals and make this a full 3D card. But to be honest, I think this is just so lovely in itself. I don't think it needs to have so many flowers 3D'd onto it. It's very generous and it's a very lovely design. But from somebody who likes to stretch their cards into more, that was a happy occasion. So what we'll do is we will put happy birthday on this one, and I am using the Mossy Meadow this time because it will coordinate nicely with the stems. I'm just going to pop it over to one side more, because then we can attach this flower to it with the dimensional. So what I'm going to do actually is I'm going to put the dimensional on the edge of the layered, the greeting part. So if we pop it as close to the edge as we can get, we know it's not going to hang over any, but then we know when we put the flower on, I'm going to try and do it with the shorter edges of the flower, so we're not obscuring too much of the greeting. And then same concept applies. We've got a dimensional here right at the edge. So in order to attach it, I'm going to do that with dimensionals, but I'll put one at that end and one just beyond where the flower is stuck on. So when it goes in the envelope, it can scrunch down onto itself. So there we have that. And then technically that's the card, but I then felt guilty that I had taken away all of its dimensions. So I'm going to bring in the Wink of Stella, which is a lovely glitter pen, and I am just going to Wink of Stella all the visible well, I keep calling them sunflowers. They're not sunflowers, Alyson, they're daisies. It's why it's called Daisy Dreams. Oh my gosh, sometimes I scare myself. My lack of horticultural knowledge sometimes just comes glaring through. So these daisies, these lovely Michaelmas type daisies, but there we have it. And I did have a little extra honeycomb. I'm not sure where I had ever intended that to be, but you know what? I will pop it back and I will use it for another card. Just have to remember, of course, that this one still has wet glitter on it. So there we have it. We used 3 bases. The blue one, of course, was the full base, so we only got 1 card out of that. We used 1 sheet of the doodads, and there are still 2 bees left over because I stamped them because I thought if I made multiples of the same card, I would need the B to be happy. So there are the 2 white cards, bearing in mind that one is still a little bit wet. There's the 1 ZZ fold card with the envelope for the inside. And then we have the other 2 cards that were made using split the elements from one of the other cards. Let me just bump these up. I don't want to hide my blog address so that you guys can still see them. So there you have it. 3 card bases, 5 cards. I think they're all pretty the same but different. Those, you know, it's great. I've had the best fun. Thank you for watching. If you've made it this far, I commend you. I will be doing more. This kit is just unbelievable. So check back, check my blog for all the details for these cards. And in the meantime, thanks so much for watching.